Medicine has separated the body into parts, and that's why they have specialists. Here, we have a heart specialist. Well, guess what? Your big toe controls your heart. If Simeon puts a pebble in a shoe, it affects his heart rate. So do we just change the heart, look at the heart? Or do we have to look at everything together? Medicine separates it.
Welcome to the Healing Reset. This is a health podcast aimed at providing hope in your body's ability to heal and maintain that health. Contrary to modern day belief, you guys, you're amazing. You're designed to heal. I'm Jess, your host. Today, we have on a man of so many hats. I'm really excited about this one. He's a doctor of the wellness way. He's an author, a fellow podcaster, and just a good guy. Today, we have on Dr. Patrick Flynn. So we're going to talk to you guys about the detrimental impacts of stress and that those impacts and how it plays into your life. So thanks for being with us today, Dr. Flynn.
Thank you, Jessica, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I've heard you say chronic health conditions are an all-time high, which frankly, if you look around, that's an obvious, right? We see that.
Yep.
Now, something needs to change. You've said we need a different perspective.
Yes.
For you, what is that perspective and how do we as consumers shift our perspectives?
I think I've created the greatest example to understand healthcare that will not only teach you what you should do as an individual, but it doesn't matter what condition you're suffering from. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter any stage of life. That if you get this example, it will tell you what is your best doctor. It'll tell you what's your best course of action. And it'll actually show you that even though the United States spends more on medical care than anybody in history, and then than most people combined, that this example will show you that why we're in such a state that we're in and what we can do to actually change it. And the thing is, it just changes your thinking. So I want you to picture this, Jessica, really quickly. So let's say that you're just driving down the road and you saw a house that just caught on fire. Okay. If you think about this simply, who's the best professional to handle that house on fire? I know it sounds simple, but walk me through that with me. What do you think it is?
Yeah. Fire professionals, fireman, right. Not I.
Now, I'm happy you said that because I want you to think about this. I want you to do this. You're going to grab your phone and you're going to call the professional, and it's very intent that they get there as quickly as possible because they wait for 3 hours, the house is going to burn down. But let's look what the fire department actually does. They really have two tools when they deal with the house. They have an axe and they have a hose.
I was going to say big hose. They have a big hose, Dr. Flynn. They have an axe. Yes.
And so the axe, what are they going to do to your doors and windows?
They're going to tear them down.
The other guy's going to run with the hose and he's going to start spraying the inside and outside of your house. Now, if they actually spray the inside of your house and all of a sudden it hits pictures of your kids, because I know you have 2 daughters, okay? What happens to the pictures of your kids?
They get drenched.
Destroys it. That's right. Yeah. It destroys them. What happens to your carpet itself?
It's gone.
Destroyed. What about your wall? What about your walls?
Yeah, I'm getting the theme here. Yeah, done.
Now think about this. The fire department, you called them. The fire department has been there for about 15 minutes. And what have they done to your house so far?
They've just contributed to the hazard.
The destruction. And you stand there grateful.
Yeah.
Do you know? Now, I want you to think about this because if you remember, we're late to healthcare big time. You called the best professional to put out the fire to make sure the house doesn't burn down. But in the process of saving the house, they've caused some destruction in order to even save it. Okay. And you're not even upset about it that way.
No, we're not upset about it that way because I would have never really thought about that. I would think that's just what happens when you save the house.
Thank you. Oh, Jessica, man, you're falling right into place on this stuff. It's almost like this was set up, but guys, it wasn't. This is actually truly raw and honest. Now, if the fire department got there, did their job in time, you have a burnt up house, and the fire department is actually ecstatic saying, hey, Jessica, patting us on the back, I did a great job. Now, you would never use the fire department with their tools and education. Can you rebuild a house with an axe and a hose? Well, that makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, the axe and hose doesn't do that. You need a different professional to actually rebuild the house. And now we're going to call the contractor, the carpenter. Okay. The carpenter, let's say that he walked in, why the fire department was still there. And the fire department's going, Jessica, look at no chance of another fire. Amazing. Great job. The carpenter walks in with a different perspective in the same house and says, Jessica, this thing's a mess. I got to rip out this carpet, rip out these walls. I got to bring all this thing in to rebuild it. And if they both showed up at different scenarios with their tools, if the carpenter showed up with his tools and said, Jessica, house on fire, I'm going to help you. You're going to be like, dude, you're going to kill yourself. Or if you even try to take it, but the fire department said, hey, I'm going to rebuild your house when the accident hose.
It's not
You're
gonna
gonna be like, dude, it makes sense. If you understand that, you'll understand why we have so many chronic conditions. You understand why people don't understand COVID. You understand why people don't understand hormones. Let me give you an example. Let's say right now that a person, let's say is 50 years old that's listening, or I had a 50-year-old sitting right next to me right here, and they had a heart attack and stroke. Would you want me to run into my kitchen, grab a knife, and see if I can help them? Well, you're like, well, no, that's really stupid. No, we're going to call 911 because it's essential for time. So here's my analogy. Let's call medicine the fire department. Okay, for my analogy.
Yeah.
And we're going to get that 50-year-old to the hospital as quickly as possible. And they're going to use their axes and hoses. Let me prove it to you. They're going to put that hose into his arm and they're going to start pumping that medication into his body. So I got a simple question for you, Jessica, and you have to answer it for me to the best of your knowledge. When they start pumping that medication into his body, is it good for his body?
I would say no.
And
is it good for his body, or is it? I mean, you think of receptor sites, and you think of mechanisms of action, and you think of all these things that medicine does to maybe stop acute issues. But is that
so? Here, watch this. You're thinking, but you're not the average American. Think about this. People say, yes, it's good for him. No. I didn't ask if it saved his life. I asked you if it's good for his body.
Yeah.
Watch. Is the water spraying on your kids' pictures or on the walls good for the walls? No. So even though the medication could save that person's life, it still can cause a lot of destruction.
It's the downstream impacts. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not saying don't use it. So don't confuse that. But what I'm saying is this: there is no drug that's safe. So when people come out saying it's safe and effective, not that it's happened over the last 2 years, but we'll keep that quiet. That's a lie. There is no drug that's safe, because every drug, regardless if it's a Hall's cough drop or if it's something that can save somebody's life, if you read the back of it, it has side effects and warnings.
And I challenge our audience constantly. Don't just read the back of it. Read the package insert. Pull out that newspaper.
And remember, and I'm okay with it if you actually understand the risk, because when there's a risk, there should always be a choice. No government, no employer, no anything should be able to actually do that. And we've seen that over the last year. Now, here's my point. This is all things. Now, let's say that the drug didn't save his life. Could that person, now they only have one tool left, and axe surgery? Could that person possibly die from that surgery? Absolutely. But can you agree with me on this point? And remember my analogy. If your house, let's say your body, your house catches on fire, and could you agree with me that you may need drugs or surgery to stay alive? Could you agree with me on that?
Absolutely.
So over the last 50 to 100 years, we've created some system that they call healthcare, which is not really healthcare, that actually has done a better job in the last 50 years saving life. That was 75 years ago. If you cut your hand off, you probably would have died. Now they can glue it back on and you don't die. Now, so we've lived a little bit longer because we survived fires better than ever in history. But you know what is this? Let's say that was somebody that you dearly cared about. You want his house or her house to be there for a long time. So when you approach the fire department doctor and say, Doc, why did they have a heart attack and stroke? And what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, you're not speaking fire department language. They'll look at you and go, Jessica, do you understand that person almost died? Do you understand that, guess what? That we almost lost them. I need them to take a baby aspirin, statin drug, and high blood pressure medication for how long?
For the duration of their life.
Now, think about this. If I came to your house, let's go back to just the house, and I sprayed the inside and outside down every single day, could you agree with me that we would have a chance of having less fires? Yes. Yeah. But what would happen to the inside and outside your house over time?
They break down. It's incongruent.
So we have more chronic illness ever in history because we don't have carpenter type doctors, unless you're me. Carpenter doctors that know how to take care of the house, maintain it, make sure it doesn't catch on fire. Fires are preventable for most time. But on top of it, even if you've survived a fire, we don't have a system that teaches people how to rebuild their body of every organ, every system of the body. We're going to spray your house down every day to have less fires, but even know they're creating more chronic illness ever in history because of that. Do you follow me in that? 100%. So I tell people that example right there will show you. For example, I love when the AARP came out with this when COVID started. They said, COVID only shows you how sick people really are. Because you know why? Because if your house is strong, you have a sniffle. But if your house is weak, it'll catch on fire really badly. And you could even die.
Yeah, a balanced body should be able to combat a virus.
Of course
every
it is.
single day.
Of course it is. So I want you to, so the only thing that I first start with somebody is this, is your perspective has to move more to a carpenter type thinking. And the only thing I did, which made myself unique in hormones and all things like that, that I've now be able to build clinics all over the world, is stuff is I just taught at a big medical seminar this past weekend with all famous medical doctors. I came along and said, y'all got it wrong.
You were at a conventional center or were you at
Yes.
Okay.
No, this was more this, but I've spoke at medical schools. I speak at, no joke, and we're going to get into some of that stuff. But see, here's what happens this. And I'm not saying we can't appreciate that if your grandpa has a heart attack and almost dies and the doctor saves his life, we should applaud that. But you know what's this? Do you know why your grandpa had a heart attack? Because he's been led by fire department doctors that lets your house fall apart and rot, and eventually it's going to catch fire anyways. You see, and it's why we have so much chronic illness, because from a child's day they're born, they're pumped full of vaccines, which are basically poisons and chemicals that water down their house on the inside, causing damage. And then every doctor you see all the way through is all fire department, and you wonder why we end up so sick.
Well, then you take the extra layer of formula. And again, there's plenty of mamas out there that have had to turn to formula, but let's just paint the picture. You take things like formula with maybe additives in it.
Similac.
And then you take things like antibiotics for chronic ear infections. And you just see this picture build and build and build to where people can't handle viruses.
Which leads them to chronic. Exactly. Because here's what happens this. Most people, 99% of the world does not have a carpenter type doctor. They have all fire department doctors trying to guide them. And the fire department cannot rebuild a house with an axe and hose. You cannot make a healthy body from a drug or surgery. If it was, tell me. You should give them to your daughters and I'll give them to mine. But it's impossible. Now they're wrong. It doesn't negate that if your daughter breaks her arm, that she needs drugs or surgery. I'm cool with that. That's understandable. But the idea is this, that's not healthcare. That's managing conditions for a long time. And that's why people end up on drugs. And that's why we have so much chronic. Remember, we have more cancer, heart disease, diabetes, infertility. And infertility was my biggest thing in practice my whole career. And 1 out of 3 couples have a problem having a baby right now. Yet we have more modern technology and more advancements in medicine ever in history, and we're still sicker. So that's why I believe the carpenter and fire department example sets you up to understand. Appreciate if you need the fire department, great, but you'll never accomplish what you want, which is a healthy, good house that can last a long time.
Listeners out there, carpenter versus it's a great way to understand where we've been conditioned and understand how we want people to think from a foundational, our body needs balance, our body needs support sometimes. However, that support doesn't come from the firefighter.
Exactly. But you can appreciate them and love them and understand they have a great role if your daughter breaks her arm. Do you understand? And or something catches on fire. But man, you know what's really funny? Most fires, even by statistics, the lowest I've ever read in every medical journal, 95% of all chronic illness is lifestyle related. That means 5% of the time in this world, the fire department, aka the medical profession, should be used. 95%, you need doctors, you need practitioners that think like a carpenter. It's totally flipped. 99% of doctors people go to are fire department doctors, and that's why we have so much chronic illness.
So I want to get to the stress conversation, but first I want to take a step back and just say, you're speaking to people who are on the 4 to 12 medications right now. Where do you point them? Where they're like, hey, I've already been using the firefighter. I feel loyal to them. I trust them, but I'm starting to kind of open my eyes to a different way. Where do you talk to people who come knocking on your door saying, hey, I've already bought into this, but I'm curious about the wellness way?
Well, I want you to think of it this way. Pick any of those 4 medications. Stop your medication. What happens? Pick one of them. Say it's high blood pressure. Drop your medication. What happens after a couple of days?
Your blood pressure goes up?
So
or it doesn't?
Never found out. No, it does. They said in 99% of cases, it goes up. Do you understand? And so you sit there and go, all right, so has your doctor ever found out what causes your high blood pressure?
Yeah.
Okay, no. So you're just going to go back. And on top of that, medication has major negative effects that's rotten inside your body. Who said so? The people who made it. You just haven't read about it. See, that's why it's like, it's kind of in Durham. And you say, just because you trust your doctor does not mean he's right.
Mm-hmm.
People trusted Fauci. How's that learned out for us?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. You understand? Because I can give you a history. Guess what? My history, I can show you almost every, do you understand? I can show you 100 drugs that they told you were good for you that now are illegal because they did totally opposite they said they're going to do.
Yeah.
It hurt people.
Vioxx.
Don't tell me everything.
Yeah.
I can give you everything from a hormone to everything that way. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're just conditioned to think this way because your grandma told you listen to your doctor.
And we're conditioned to think we need a quick fix and there's going to be a pill for our ill. And earlier you said something that resonated so much. It's just like management of symptoms is just depressing. That's not what we're about here. Obviously, we speak to hope, but management of symptoms, like, do you want that the rest of your life?
Yep. Well, on top of it, here's what happens this is the only people that will ever make a change is when they're just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then because if they actually researched, that's why I know I'm always going to relate stuff to COVID because I kind of giggle a little bit. And like, Doc, I did my own research. I said, you couldn't have, they're trying to bury it for 55 years. You were a press release leader. You say, so there was no research on it. There still isn't. Now that's coming out. It's very corrupt. So long story short is when people put the basic medication, like I just, no joke, today's my third podcast. I get interviewed a lot. Okay. And here, let me give you an example. I'm going to speak to you women out there, because mainly women that are taking levothyroxine or Synthroid, which is a very common thyroid medication. Okay, let me show you something that your medical doctor doesn't even know about because he is just a middleman. But on top of it, and I'm being very critical because I have to deal with the negative effects of women being sick so often. And their doctor's telling them, here's what you need to do. If you pull up the insert and you look at the contraindications, which mean you cannot take this medication if this. And this is, you can jump on the PDR, the physician desk reference.org. You can go and check it out, .net. And you can look this up. It's a part of the drug summary. That means, here's what happens. It says, you cannot take this medication, this thyroid medication, unless if you had adrenal insufficiency, which means, and I'm going to tie that into stress. If your adrenals are negatively affected, which means it's very common because stress crushes your adrenals, you cannot take this medication, which means you have to have your adrenals tested before you can even take thyroid medication.
And who's testing adrenals in conventional medicine?
Nobody. I have been in practice for 23 years. I have hundreds of doctors all over the world. I've trained thousands of doctors, from medical doctors, everything. And medical doctors go, I didn't even know I was supposed to do that. So if you're taking a thyroid medication and they didn't even test your adrenals yet, they're not even following basic medical protocols to make sure they don't hurt you. Think about that. Now remember, doc, I disagree. Well, then go look it up. Do you understand? And see that, and here's my point of doing this. So don't tell me you trust your doctor when he doesn't even understand the basics. Every medical person that works for me, from an NP to an MD to a pharmacist, guess what happens is when I even just show them the basics, I said, listen, and that's your world. But see, here's what happens is, being a carpenter, I know some things that can cause fires. What if I told you that it could have been a medication? Well, what if I told you, and I have pre and post labs, that could have been your COVID vaccine that depresses your immune system? It's why one of the negative side effects is actually more infections. See? But people don't, what they do is, I don't care if you trust your doctor, because your doctor could be wrong all the time.
I would have to say my eyes were pretty wide open. My eyes have been wide open for a while, but working in the pharma industry, my eyes got more wide when I realized the FDA was allowing certain things, or certain drugs were brought to the table, and in their package insert, which I often speak to, it talked about sterilization. And it's just like, how is this not being talked about? How are pregnancy categories completely dropped? And then suddenly these things are sneaking in. And so I do think that there is, again, if we're looking from a carpenter mentality, and if we're not going to challenge our doctors, then maybe start doing our own research out there, right? Like, what am I on? What are these side effects? And some people are like, well, we don't want to know. Well, then why do you have high blood pressure? It goes back to that same.
Here, put it this way. Do you have a thyroid problem because you lack levothyroxine or Synthroid in your body?
No.
See, that's a carpenter question. But see, you're not taught to ask carpenter questions. You're taught to ask fire department questions. Here, if I put a pink ribbon on this here, right here, what pops in your head right away?
Breast cancer.
Thank you. So you're conditioned in fires, diseases. Mm-hmm. See, I'm trying to get people, and here's what happens. I know what everyone, your listeners, wants. You know what they want? They want to be healthy.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. You were in the pharma industry, things like that. You understand the medical field. Please tell me a vaccine, a drug, a surgery that makes you healthy. There is none. They don't bring that. There's a manipulation. There's an inhibition. And what people try to equate is like, well, doc, if I have high blood pressure, I could die if it's at 220 over 150. Sure, you can, but it's your sick body that actually got you there. And knocking it down extends your life. That should give you a little time to figure out what's going on. Medications were there to make sure your house didn't burn down, which gave you time to rebuild the inside.
Yeah. Do you have full confidence that all chronic conditions can be rebuilt?
No.
Or is there a point of...
No, there is a permanency. I've seen permanency myself. Remember, I have medical people. I'll say they need this medication probably forever. And my NPs or my MDs will look at it and go, hey, listen, or my pharmacist, because I have a wellness place owned by a pharmacist and stuff. And one of my best friends is a pharmacist. And his wife was so sick. That's how we met. She had vaginosis so bad, they couldn't figure it out. It was very easy to figure out. Reversed all that process. Guess what? Healthy and vibrant. She's in her mid 50s now and great. And Dan, he even teaches. He's been on my show. It's kind of great. And he's a very brilliant pharmacist, but they're always looking and reacting to it. And then guess what happened? I'm like, guys, here's an internal infection that caused it. And then we found the infection that they never even thought about looking for. And it wasn't related to vaginosis. It was related to systemic chronic infection in their body. And it was hidden. And then we diagnostically found it with labs, and then we killed it off, using a drug. And of course, she went back to normal because your body's genetically programmed to be normal. Any doctor that tells you that you're genetically programmed to be sick doesn't understand the human body.
We talk about the design for balance. Your body is designed to be balanced. It doesn't mean that looks perfect on everybody right now, but that means that we should always be seeking this.
Let's go back to this. Do you understand the number one thing that throws off homeostasis is? Which is the quote balance?
Toxin, stress.
Stress. And the stressors are physical, chemical, and emotional. And I've proven beyond a shadow of doubt that emotional stress will kill a woman faster than anything. I have hundreds of thousands of labs just in my office here in Green Bay, but I have millions of labs that prove it from all the clinics we have from all over the world. Because here's what happens: the minute that mental stress comes, because at least if there's a physical stress, let me give you an example. If I were to, what's your husband's name?
Simeon.
If I were to put a pebble in Simeon's shoe in the morning and have him walk around it all day long, what would be his mindset like at the end of the day?
He'd be frustrated.
What would be his blood pressure?
It would be high.
Thank you. It would go high because that physical stressor, now the body has to adapt to that stress. So let me ask you a question. Should we give him some drugs to lower it?
No, we can take the pebble out of his shoe.
Wait, why don't we move to some natural things like some B vitamins or some magnesium to help with blood pressure?
Because there's just a pebble in his shoe.
Yeah, but you laugh, but I want you to think about this. The number one reason why people go to doctors every single day over the age of 40 is blood pressure. So do they ever try to find the stress, the pebble in the shoe that caused it to go up? Or do they lower it? Or they do even the dumber thing, which I think the alternative movement is just as stupid. It's still a fire department thinking just with natural things. My example is the alternative movement is no more than throwing spring water on instead of chlorinated water on it.
Yeah.
I know that's good too. And see, that's why we have more availability to natural things and medical things ever in history, yet we have more chronic illness and more sickness, because the one thing that has to change before you do anything is your thinking. Otherwise, you're just going to change products.
How do you differentiate male and female with the emotional stressors?
Dramatically. Here's what happens. Simeon gets stronger during emotional stress. And feminists hate that because men are meant to handle stress, women are not. And I can prove it diagnostically. Because here's what happens is this. Let me give you a simple example. If you were to look at a hormone pathway, your stress pathway, you'll go in the number one, here, watch this. The number one ingredient to produce every anabolic hormone, including our stress hormones, do you know what it is? It's cholesterol. Okay. So therefore, you can't even make any hormones without cholesterol. No, my doctor told me cholesterol is bad for me. Yeah, your doctor has no idea what he's talking about. You say, we've been lowering cholesterol levels for 75 years. How are we doing in heart disease? Cholesterol is essential for brain function. It's the number one organ that uses cholesterol, actually. That's why if you look at the negative side effects of statin drugs, it's dementia, Alzheimer's, impotence, hormone problems. It's funny because the company that creates statin drugs also creates Viagra, because they create impotence and then all of a sudden they have something to be able to deal with it.
They can treat it.
Yeah. It's like if something was created in a lab and they created something else to try to take care of it. Just a little analogy there. So let's go like this. See, cholesterol converts to different hormones, including progesterone, which converts to cortisol and cortisone. And therefore, that mental chronic stress or the inflammation, which is cortisone, actually drains a woman's progesterone. It doesn't affect a guy's testosterone. And therefore, that's why stressors deplete female hormones faster than anything. Now, there are certain chemical stressors and physical ones that can affect a male. It just won't affect his hormone the way it affects women. And that's why it's dramatically different.
Amy, I see the differences in how emotionally I might handle something compared to my husband. There's no doubt in my mind that we we process things different.
Well, and the cool thing is this. Now, let me say this because I know people have been critically on this. I've never said that women were weak. And let me explain. You and your husband may have something mentally you may both deal with, and you could even deal with it better than he does. My concern as a doc is knowing that if your chronic mental stress does not go down, your body will shut down and be destroyed. And he will get a little stronger because if I were to attack your husband mentally, his testosterone goes up.
Mm-hmm.
See, so I'm concerned about your house long-term.
Mm-hmm.
See, go back to my analogy. I'm a carpenter. I want to keep your body in great shape, your house. I want to be able to be like, okay, this room's perfect. This room's perfect. And that's why you need a doc that can actually rebuild every room of the house. Heart, liver, kidneys, adrenals, all stuff of that. See, medicine has separated the body into parts. And that's why they have specialists. Here, we have a heart specialist. Well, guess what? Your big toe controls your heart. If Simeon puts a pebble in a shoe, it affects his heart rate. So do we just change the heart, look at the heart? Or do we have to look at everything together? Medicine separates it.
The body, one system.
Thank you. And it's all connected.
And that's where it's like we're running around with 10 different doctors for 10 different organs, whatever that is, for 10 different systems. And we're trying to like fix and heal. And people do want to be healthy.
But you can't accomplish it with specialists. You can't accomplish it with drugs or surgery. You actually make it worse. Yet the majority of people, from the time your child was born, you're brought in the fire department doctors, you wonder why we're so sick. And their glory is, okay, we live longer. Actually, over the last 5 years, our life expectancy went down by 2 years. So, and here's the point. And I'm not saying don't give credit the fact that if we break an arm, we are better off than in every other country. Or if we have something, if somebody does have a heart attack, we have a better way of surviving. But guess what happens? Those heart attacks are preventable. It's not your grandpa's fault. It's not your dad's fault. It's not your mom's fault. Guess what happens? The only fault that they have is they gave you the same stressors from your physical, mental, and emotional ones, and they passed them down to all the bad habits that led you to make your body bad in the first place. Your genes are meant to create homeostasis, not disease.
How do people even recognize stressors? If there's 3 different stressors that we're really talking about, toxins, thoughts, traumas, how are people recognizing that this is an impact? Because I feel like we manage it.
No, you don't. Simple. It's very simple. I have an old saying, and this is what made my clinics and me popular all over the world, is you don't guess, we test. You can test all the stressors. You can.
Should you do that yearly?
It depends on the state of health that you're at. You know, it's much easier to deal with stuff when you're a child than you are when you're an adult because you've done so many bad things to yourself that way.
Yeah.
But you can start and let me give you something even a little bit more practical. Let's just start with this, okay? Start with some toxic stress, okay? Chemicals, all right? Because here's what happens this. It's something we introduce into our body every single day. You say, Doc, I love when people come and say, Doc, I have no idea why I'm sick. Well, would you brush your teeth this morning? Crest. You ever read the back of it? It says, if swallowed, please call poison control because it's poison.
Yeah.
It says in the back.
No, granted, to our listeners out there, I'm giggling. That is sad to me. That is insane to me. The giggle is not meant to think that's actually silly. It's not. It's insane. And it's true. Watch this. Women and their cosmetics. See, females have been my life, my whole thing, because obviously my wife's story about she was told she could never have kids. And obviously I proved them all wrong. And then I've done it. I've actually in my own personal practice, even though I don't full-time practice anymore, but I still have influence on all my docs like crazy and stuff, is I've had over 2,500 pregnancies myself come in that way that were told I could never have kids. And, but here's the point is we're doing all these little stressors every single day, a little pebble in a shoe every single day. And then people wonder why they develop an illness. Okay. And so everything from what they eat to what they put on their skin to what they think about, things like that, and all those things. And those are things they can avoid right away. But on top of it, there's things that we're doing on a regular basis that can actually cause things that put our body in a state of fight or flight that we are actually ended up with not only chronic conditions, but hormonal issues, psychological issues that they're going to just come and say, oh my goodness, well, let's give you this drug to alter those changes. Well, do you understand by definition, a medication is called a non-lethal dose of a lethal substance. It's a toxin itself. That's why there's always side effects. That's why when people say, of course, I'm just picking on COVID stuff. Oh, everything's safe and effective. There is no such thing as a safe drug. There's not, because they all cause destruction, even if it does save your life. So back to the labs. What should people draw? What should people be going to their doctors, going to people like you and saying, I want to know.
What I would start with is this, okay? It's going to be quite simple. It'll depend on age and stuff like that. It'll depend on if you're female or male, because if you look at the major stressors that really destroy a life, and I'll give you a scenario on this. Guys, it's going to be what they eat, okay? Especially sugar. Sugar would destroys a guy's hormones faster than anything. That's why we see so many. You can't watch a football or sporting event without a low T commercial now. Low T clinics are popping up all over. Number one thing that reduces
low T is in testosterone.
Yes. The number one thing that lowers men's testosterone is the consumption of sugar, by far. It's why you see so many problems and guys having man boobs more than history and guts and everything like crazy. And instead of telling the guy to actually stop being a slob and stop eating so much junk, they say, here, we'll replace it with a synthetic hormone, which is not their hormones and stuff like that. Actually, it's a chemical. But on top of it, actually, you look on a box, some of the major side effects are aggression and murder. It says murder on there and stuff. But once again, nobody reads the inserts. But on top of it, because you know why? Because they can't control the dosing no matter how much they inject or actually put a pellet inside you. And it's not your normal hormone. But then second of all, when you look at women, I would actually, especially if they're over the age of 13, I would actually get their hormones tested first, because hormones can actually lead to show what other stressors that are going to lead to a person's body. And so I would always start there. No. Some people may come in with ulcerative colitis. My wife had endometriosis, ulcerative colitis, cystic acne and stuff like that. So, and remember, nobody taught me this stuff. You think I'm joking. She saw all these doctors, natural doctors, medical people that way, and they all had it wrong because they were all fire department thinking with her. And I looked and going, and something that's going to surprise you. Let me give you an example. So we talked about, let's say your husband, if we wanted to really see a hormone that makes him who he is, we know it's his testosterone. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you as a woman, we have all the hormones same as you do. We just have a lot of testosterone and we don't have a lot of your hormone. What is the major hormone that makes women who they are? Take a guess at it. Okay. Here. Now, most women say that, but estrogen is not a hormone. Now, I know your listeners are going, what?
Yeah. I think of the estrogen, testosterone. We have testosterone. It comes from, it's a little different than males.
It's a lot lower too. Yeah. You range from 20 to 40. We range from 5 to 1200. But here's the point. See, here's what happens in women like going, what do you mean estrogen is not a hormone? Well, look it up. Try to find it for me. You can't, because it doesn't exist. Estrogen is a term that describes many hormones. Okay. Now, I want you to think about this. So I'm 24 years old at the time when I met my wife, and I was just finishing up school, finishing up my graduate doctorate. And all of a sudden, she had endometriosis so bad, which by dominance, if you know anything about endometriosis, it's an estrogen-based condition. So I looked at her labs and they had estradiol. I'm like, okay, where are the 9 other estrogens? See, I probably surprised everyone, you guys. Ladies, if you've never had all 10 of your estrogens measured, you don't know how your health or how your hormones are, because how can you make a judgment on a woman's physical and mental health if you don't even have a picture of all of them? Or
for my case, if you're just learning that there's 10 of them.
Thank you. And that's most people across the world. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I'm sitting there going, and so that's my point. And so because I'm a carpenter doctor, I want to make sure that all those estrogens, the room in your house is really good. They don't even measure them. And so I called the largest lab in the world. Now, this is 23 years ago. And I said, can we measure all of them? Here was their response. Yes, but why? Because insurance won't pay for them. And I'm like, I have a sick girlfriend who's told she can't have kids. They wanted to rip her uterus out. She cries every single time she gets her period because it feels like her skin is ripping off. You really think I care about that? And even though her very caring, very nice medical doctor measured her estradiol, that's one of them. And they wanted to rip her uterus out without even having a complete view of what was going on. So then I measured all of them, and still to this day, and actually millions of patients now after 23 years in all the offices across the world, we have never seen anybody come in and ever have their hormones tested properly. Here, I guarantee you're pretty young. Okay. May I ask your age?
Yeah. 37.
37. You're now moving into the realm of where if estrogens get out of whack, you could end up with breast cancer. But I want you to think about this. You're 37 years old. You never even knew that till right now. And you've never had them measured. Yet those estrogens can dictate your mental, dictate if you get cancer, dictate if you don't get cancer, dictate your physical health, dictate your weight, dictate everything that way. And so I'm sitting there going, why don't we get a picture of them? Now people say, well, why doesn't my other doctor do it? Because they have no tool that get them back to normal. There's no drug or surgery that can get them normal. So that's why they're not measured and stuff. So I came along and said, I can figure this out. And I did. And my wife's body is genetically programmed to go back to normal. So as we got them back to normal, her endometriosis dissipated. Her uterine lining went back to normal. And now, of course, that's why it was very easy for her to get pregnant. Now she pops out kids like Skittles. Okay. And now we've done that hundreds of thousands of times across the world. And I know it sounds simple, but I tell you this, it's simple as I explain it to you from a carpenter viewpoint, but from a medical viewpoint, it makes no sense to them. And that's why I get to speak at medical schools and medical conferences and natural conferences and things like that. Because you know why? Because it's clinically very sound, very easy, and then applicable to what women are searching for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing we talk with often about the thyroid. Why aren't you testing a whole picture of the thyroid? And I never really knew application crossover, or I never thought about it when it came to, I mean, one of the shows that we recently did, it was like, we're not testing hormones, period. Why aren't we testing hormones, period? And I wasn't even thinking of a 10 spot for estrogen.
I can tell you why. In my example with my carpenter and fire department, I told you, will give you so many answers. There is no drug or surgery that gets them back to normal. So insurance won't pay for it because it's not a fire test.
Yeah.
It's not a pathology test. Do you follow me in that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And remember, for example, when I taught people how to test the thyroid 23 years ago, because TSH is not a thyroid hormone. It's not.
It's not a picture of your thyroid health. Yeah.
No, what they do is it's pituitary saying produce more thyroid hormone, but it's not a thyroid hormone. It's a brain hormone. But the reason why they test it as the gold standard, because that's what they use to manipulate with levothyroxine and Synthroid. And they say, oh, TSH is at 2 now. Everything's good. Well, where is all the factors that actually see all the other thyroid hormones, plus all the factors like your cortisol, plus like your TBG and all things that can be affected by all the other gears to see what threw that off in the first place? Nope, just stay on levothyroxine and Synthroid because my doctor's educated. He's a real doctor. I know it sounds funny, but that's the bull crap you hear. And so, and the sad part is that's why we have so much chronic, in that levothyroxine actually suppresses your adrenals. Who said so? The medication. And if you have bad adrenals already, they're going to cause adrenal problems. It's now going to lead to other problems across the whole system of your body because all those gears are connected.
The body is a system. So what I hear you saying is that stress, you really need to check out hormones.
Well, you need to check out all. So let me give you another example. Let's go back to, remember, it's a way to start that process. But remember, here, watch this. If you have physical stress, let me give you an example. Okay. You ever stub your toe? Sure. Blood pressure change, everything like that. But there's structural things. You can take an x-ray to see if you have any problems in your spine. Those are physical stresses. That's why people get massaged, and guess what happens? Reduces stress, and they can even change your blood pressure. You know what I'm saying? If you look at all the physical things, you can get adjusted by a chiropractor. Chemical stresses. You need to make sure you don't have food allergies. I can die from an egg. Well, people say, Doc, why don't you eat a non-chemical organic egg? Well, I'll just be organically dead. Yes, I don't want to eat any chemicals, but you need to get your food allergies tested, because I love when people say, Doc, I have a great diet, and nutrition is my background. That was my first aspect of college besides immunology. But I want you to think about this, is if you have a food allergy unknown that you just eat and cause the inflammation, you don't see anything, or like most people don't have an allergy like me where you can die from an allergy. Most people, it's chronic inflammatory things, and then it slowly beats on you and don't know anything until something comes up that way. So that's when people say, Doc, I have a great diet. I'm like, cool, let me see your food test.
Isn't there some discrepancy with food tests? Is there specific ones that are more reputable than others?
Oh, yes, that is true. I see some of these labs come out and they're testing IgG4s and they're not testing the complete immune response. And so, yes, and it's really sad. You know, I'm very saddened by that because it misleads people. But see, that's why you need to go to a credible person that knows what they're doing and stuff. So, but foods are still valid. There's still great labs out there that do it that way. There's still great labs that, remember, there's multiple people that can do multiple labs that can do hormone testing. I have my favorites, but there's multiple ones that are great. But then also too is this. Then we look at those emotional stressors, which for women, I still think is the biggest culprit. And that's why it's important to test your adrenals. It's important to see where cortisol and other stress hormones are at, because if they're elevated, you got to find what's doing it that way.
And that's just really indicative of like stress, right? Driving someone to this high stress level. And how do you do that? You can remove the stressor if we're talking emotional stress in that scenario. I feel this conversation pretty hard just because there's stressors in this world we live. It's so fast paced. We all know this. We get caught up in that, but it's hard to not think of a day you don't go through where there's not a gap in expectation to where it's like, I expected something to go that way. It didn't. And that gap is my frustration or my stress.
But think about this though. Here's one thing I can honestly tell you I've learned. And remember, like I said, I want you to think about this. There's some things I had to learn on the fly. And let me give you an example. Just by me telling you this now, you know this. You can even feel some hormonal changes when you're stressed. You really can. Okay. Now that you're aware of it, you'll be like, oh, wait, now the unknown is known. And I gotta breathe
through it.
I gotta calm down. I gotta do this. Because people realize breathing techniques are one of the greatest things to reduce stress. No cost, can do it really fast. But here's my point. When women are not aware of it, the unknown is killing them. Now that they just listen to that, they'll go, you're right, doc. 20 times a day, I feel that cortisol, that stress coming to me that way. But now that I know it, at least now I can kind of bring myself back from it that way.
And you've developed some just ways to cope with stress that are simple. What are some of those? What's that advice when you're sitting across from a woman, a man, just saying, hey, bro, I think you're stressed.
Yeah, I would tell you this. I mean, I try to do very low cost things for them because I want people to repeat it on a regular basis. Not a joke. There's fantastic breathing exercises. Now there's one, especially if a woman, because I have had to deal with massive anxiety because women have bad hormones that can create some bad things that way. It's not a joke. I want you to, if you have a partner, have a spouse, things like that, ladies, do me a favor, lay on your belly. Okay. Now, once again, you might have to turn your head a little bit, but breathe in really deep. Hold it for a second, breathe all the way out, and have your husband put a hand on each side of your spine where your lungs are. And as you actually breathe out, push out as far as you can and have your husband push all the air out of your lungs like that way. Okay. Don't push too hard. You'll crack the ribs. But here, and then breathe in deep and do it again. Do that 5 times and watch what happens. See, there is a suspensory ligament that goes from your lungs to your heart. And it actually stretches the heart too and relaxes it. And you produce some major calming endorphins that way by stretching. Remember, because your heart's a muscle too. And it just calms you down. It really does. Now, I've had to say, people, doc, I do that 20 times a day. Well, it's better, end up on an anxiety med right now and things like that. Actually, people don't realize this. I'm a very big fan of proprioceptive stimulation. Like, for example, I don't like to sit. Even sitting this long drives me nuts, okay? But I want you to picture this. If you take your hand and you shake it, okay? Shake it really hard. And you stop. You feel that vibration?
Yeah.
That's called proprioceptive stimulation. It's very calming for the nervous system. It actually reduces major calming neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, things like that. But here's the point. That's why I love vibe plates, things that cause vibration to your body, things that just calm down. You can buy a vibe plate for $200 online and stuff like that. And see, there's things that you can do on a daily basis that can just put your body in a great state. Then if you can learn to remove the other stressors, bad chemical stressors, physical ones, things like that, you start to put your body in the ability to adapt. Now, are things you can take that are adaptogenic, like ashwagandha and things like that for internal adaptation? Yes, there's things you can take for immune adaptation and heart adaptation, all things like that. Yeah, there's great things you can eat and stuff like that. That's what a carpenter doctor will teach you so you can maintain your house for a long time, even because no one's going to avoid stressors. They're going to be there. But you know what happens is this? If your body can adapt to the stress, you're going to live a long time. If your body can't adapt to a virus that stresses it out, you could die from the flu. You can die from a bacteria. But there's people that can come in contact with every virus in the world and get a little sniffle because their body can adapt. Do you understand?
I always find, and I'm not sure if this makes sense, but the times that I allow myself to get sick are when I'm not sleeping well and I'm not eating well. I'm on vacation and we had a newborn baby, so we're not sleeping well. And it's just like this storm that comes together, and it's so your body's been stressed. And I think even starting to think intuitively along those lines, why did this sickness even occur? Well, I'm not strong right now. I'm allowing stress to overcome.
Thank you. You see what happens this, you put some chemical stress in there, and then there's an old saying in healthcare, if you don't sleep, you don't heal. Because people don't realize sleep is so important. Women need 8 to 10 hours every single day. Men need anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 maximum. Guys can get away with a lot less stress, a lot less sleep. Women cannot. And the sad part is this. If women, here, watch this. Ladies, you're stressing your body out even if you go to bed at midnight and sleep till 10 in the morning. You need to be in bed between 9 and 10. You actually have, once again, and endocrine buildup and reserves that really in your adrenals go from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. That's why if you don't realize about 3 a.m., it starts to go up. And that's why when women are under high stress, they'll wake themselves up about 3 o'clock in the morning. That's why it's called the witching hour, because your stress hormones jump up too early. It wakes you up and you can't go back to sleep. And that's one of the even questions as a history I'll ask a woman all the time. So it's very important for a woman to actually go to bed between 9 and 10. And what you do is when you find that out and now you sleep till 5 or 6, people are like, Doc, I'm just even more energetic. Well, of course, because you allowed that hormonal reserve that's supposed to carry you through the day. You go to bed at midnight, you got maybe an hour's worth of reserves coming into you, and you wonder why you get up dragging butt and need stimulants like coffee and different things that way. And during coffee is good for you if you have organic stuff. But the idea is because you're not even understanding how your body works and how to maximize the output even by your sleep.
Guys, you want to live longer? De-stress, recognize stress, cope with stress. Recognize it, cope with it, help your body manage stress. Nice. Dr. Flynn, this is just blowing my mind. Thanks for this awesome conversation. We can wrap it up though, so you can get out of that seat and get moving. 3 things our listening audience can do to just have better health today. Number 1, I would say, recognize every woman, every guy is different. We all have different stressors. Find them. Number 2, you need raw material to rebuild your house. What you eat is so important. It really is. Now, once again, I'm a doc. I don't leave anything up for chance. I like testing what a body needs, I like testing what a body's stressing out on that way. I like to do all the stuff that way. But I will give you this caveat to understand something that's quite simple. If you want to know the most nutritional, dense foods on the planet that I can blanket that everybody needs, with the exception if you're allergic to it, it's going to be a little hard to be allergic to this, is organ meats. People have gotten away from that. Organ meats in every nutritional book, and remember, that's my background. I can give you every textbook on the plant nutrition. And I even teach it to big schools, is organ meats are the most nutritional, dense foods in the world. Vegetables don't have a lot of vitamins. Vegetables have a lot of provitamins that have to be converted. Organ meats actually are still the most nutrient-dense things in the world. And I know people don't eat them there. We do. My baby girls do. My wife, and my patients do. And actually, they're very cheap because no one eats them. Third thing that I think is by far most important. Once again, do the simple things. Like I said before, start to live a non-toxic life. Look at your cosmetics, look at your stuff, and little by little start somewhere and replace them. If you're eating an avocado, change to an organic avocado. Do you know why? Because there's pesticides in the avocado, which are by nature a stressor in the chemicals of your body. Start by moving a little bit more non-toxic. Because as you do, you take all those burdens, you take those pebbles out of your shoe every single day, and your body wants to be normal. It wants to be. But you'd be surprised at the things that we do. Change your toothpaste. Go to an organic one. Go to a non-fluoride one. Fluoride's a poison. Okay, that's why it has to tell you it's a poison on the back. And if you start moving in that non-toxic direction, you'd be so surprised. Stuff you're just doing at home changes everything on the inside. Awesome. You guys heard it here from Dr. Flynn. This was a great, great conversation. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Statements and views expressed in this podcast are not medical advice and have not been evaluated by the FDA. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse nor accept responsibility for statements made by guests.